Jonah Lomu's death, a rugby icon gone too soon. For anyone who remembers the '95 World Cup, Lomu's name isn't just a name, it's the name, the guy who ran over England's Catt like he was a traffic cone. He was the first real superstar of rugby, making the game appealing to people who might never have thought twice about it before. The guy who made entire teams rethink their defensive strategies because no one could figure out how to stop him. Lomu didn't just play rugby, he embodied it. His raw power and blistering speed were like nothing the world had ever seen before. He was a winger, sure, but his size and strength made him seem like a back row forward in disguise, watching him power through tackles, shrugging off defenders like they were nothing. Felt like watching a human cheat code. But like many legends, and all humans really, Lomu's life wasn't without struggle. His health battles were well known, and after he was diagnosed with a rare kidney condition, he underwent a transplant in 2004. Despite this, his death still shocked us all. For someone whose very presence on the field defied all logic, it seemed almost unfair that he could be taken so easily, so soon. 2015 was definitely that sad year for rugby fans, and it was not just about Lomu, there was also Gerry Collins. Gerry Collins' death, a heartbreaking loss. The legendary All Blacks lock, known for his relentless physicality and fierce determination on the field, Collins was the embodiment of toughness, a player who threw himself into every tackle, every ruck, and every game. His raw power and no-nonsense style made him a standout in the 2003 and 2007 Rugby World Cups, and he was a key part of New Zealand's success throughout his career. But beyond his ferocity on the pitch, he was known for his kindness and humility off it. His infectious smile and warmth made him everyone's favourite, from teammates to fans, which is why losing him at 34 to a car crash in France hit everyone like an avalanche. Not only did he die, but his wife also died in the same accident, but his daughter Ayla miraculously survived. Unlike most sports, a rugby player who is 34 years old is still very much in his prime and still has a lot to offer the world of the sport, but death does not ask for permission, does it? Gerry Collins wasn't just a rugby player, he was a man who gave his all to the game and to those around him. His passing left an irreplaceable void, but his legacy of toughness, loyalty and kindness lives on, no doubt. While Gerry Collins moved to the other side of life, Dan Carter simply bid farewell to the All Blacks jersey. Still, his final match was a bittersweet occurrence. Dan Carter's 2015 farewell match, and it happened at the 2015 Rugby World Cup final. You probably remember it, the All Blacks versus Australia, Twickenham Stadium. The whole world was watching, but for All Blacks fans, it was more than a World Cup final. It was the end of an era, the final time they would see the man who defined the modern fly half. A man who, 4 years earlier, had to watch his team win the World Cup from the sidelines due to injury. He finally got his chance to not just be part of the final, but to own it. In his last game, Carter was nothing short of a magician. He scored 19 points, including a clutch drop goal from 40 metres out that crushed Australia's comeback hopes, and even nailed a conversion with his weaker right foot. It was a flawless man-of-the-match performance, the perfect ending. And that's the sadness of it. The joy of winning a World Cup was intertwined with the finality of watching the greatest to ever do it walk away. He was at the absolute peak of his powers, playing with a mastery that few have ever reached, and we all knew right there and then that we'd never see it again. A beautiful, perfect farewell that left the rugby world with a heavy heart. But it is better to know your legend is living rather than dead, right? We know where to find Carter, but Vickerman is a different sad story. The death of Dan Vickerman. You remember him as a Wallabies enforcer, a massive, uncompromising lock who played with a quiet intensity, the kind of player you'd be glad to have on your team and terrified to face. He had 63 caps, played in 3 World Cups, and then, after a career full of brutal hits and incredible moments, he retired in 2012. But the story took a devastating turn years later. On February 18th, 2017, at just 37 years old, Vickerman died by suicide. The news was a gut punch that shook the entire rugby world. It wasn't just the shock of losing a great player so young. It was the chilling, sobering reminder that mental health battles are very real, and the strongest among us still face them. His death has helped the sport to be deliberate about looking inward, to talk about the immense pressure and struggles that athletes face long after their playing days are over. Vickerman's tragedy has become a catalyst for a conversation the rugby world desperately needed to have, and that's a legacy that, while born from immense sadness, is one of the most important in the game. We know some tragedies cannot be helped, but some could have been prevented. Take the apartheid-era Springbok tours, for instance. Apartheid-era Springbok tours. At some point in history, rugby was no longer a game, but a battleground, and that's where we find the sad, brutal story of the apartheid-era Springbok tours. For decades, the Springboks were more than a team. They were a symbol of South Africa. But under the shadow of apartheid, that symbol came to represent a racist and oppressive regime. When they went on tour, rugby-loving nations were torn apart. It wasn't about who won or lost, or even right and wrong, to be honest. It was all about violence. The most famous example would be the 1981 tour of New Zealand. The country was ripped in two. People were clashing in the streets, with protesters fighting police and rugby fans just to stop the games from happening. It was a war zone. You had fans showing up with barbed wire and barricades, and protesters flying small planes over the stadium, dropping flower bombs onto the pitch. The sadness of it all wasn't just the violence. It was that the sport itself was so deeply stained by politics. The tours forced everyone to confront a terrible truth, pitting friend against friend and forcing people to choose between a game they loved and a moral stand they had to take. That was the one point in history when sports ceased to be a unifying force and instead became the very thing that divided. Sean Wainwright, gone before his time. People often say rugby's a game of physicality, but Sean proved it's a game of spirit. He played with a fire that made you believe in the game. That 5-try performance against the Waratahs, unforgettable. It wasn't just the tries, it was the way he made rugby look like an art form. Fast, explosive, with a hint of swagger. He didn't just run with the ball, he ran with a point to prove, and boy did he prove it every single time. But just when he was starting to take the world by storm, he died in a car accident at the very young age of 25. Naturally, what makes this so hard to swallow is the feeling of what could have been. He barely scratched the surface of what he was capable of. He was a proud Maori man who carried his heritage with grace and pride, and a player who wore his heart on his sleeve. His legacy isn't just in the stats and the highlights, it's in the heart he brought to every game and the fire he ignited in every fan who watched him play. The 2005 Lions Tour and Brian O'Driscoll. For a moment, that perfectly captures the cruelty of sport. We have to talk about the 2005 Lions Tour. This was meant to be Brian O'Driscoll's tour. He was the captain, the talisman, the greatest player of his generation, tasked with leading a new band of brothers to conquer the All Blacks. We all believed that if anyone could do it, it was him. And then it was over. Less than a minute into the very first test match in Christchurch, everything came crashing down. O'Driscoll, the captain, the man everyone was pinning their hopes on, was speared in a vicious two-man tackle by Tana Umaga and Kevin Lomu. See, his shoulder was dislocated, his tour was finished, and with it, the heart of the Lions' challenge was ripped out. The sadness of it wasn't just the injury itself, but the brutal injustice and the suddenness of it all. One moment he was the leader of the pack, ready to take on the world. Next, he was on the ground. The Lions went on to get hammered in a 3-0 series loss, a tour that started with so much promise, ending in bitter disappointment, but the real loss was in that first minute. We never got to see what that team, led by that captain, could have achieved. Andrew Fifita's suicide story. When Andrew Fifita opened up about his attempted suicide in 2020, it shocked the rugby league world. This was the one guy known for his dominant, tough-as-nails style of play. He was literally the epitome of strength on the field. But you know what they say about people who always look strong on the outside? Despite his fame, wealth and status as one of the NRL's best, he felt the immense pressure of constant expectations, loneliness and an inability to show vulnerability in a sport that prizes toughness above all else. And it was a really sad event, but one that didn't leave everyone sad for so long. Fortunately, he survived and decided to be open about it. Thankfully, his openness has helped stir the conversation about mental health in sport, especially in rugby league, where players are often expected to be invincible. Andrew Fifita's battle isn't over, but his journey to recovery and his advocacy for mental health have given hope to many. His message is clear. True strength comes not just from physical power, but from the courage to ask for help when you need it. Landau air disaster. Some days are better not experienced, and for Welsh rugby fans, it's the day of the Landau air disaster. The year was 1950. The Welsh national team, fresh off a historic Grand Slam victory, was on top of the world. But this story isn't about them. It's about a group of dedicated fans and a team of passionate players from Swansea and Llanelli who had travelled to Dublin for a friendly match. On March 14th, 1950, they boarded a chartered plane to fly home, full of stories from their trip. But just a few minutes before landing at Landau, the plane crashed. The disaster killed 80 people in total, including 6 players from the Welsh team, a referee, and their supporters. It was, and still is, one of the deadliest air disasters in British history. For a nation that lives and breathes rugby, the shock was immense. It wasn't just a plane crash, it was an entire community, players and fans together, that had been wiped out in an instant. This tragedy became one, and still is, one of the darkest chapters in Welsh rugby, and the world by extension, because some losses are bigger than any game, any trophy, or any rivalry. Do you remember any of these events? Please let me know in the comments and then subscribe to the channel. Thank you.